Morning everybody, I'm going to be showing you a Vanguard deck list in my wonderful, as you can see, white and gold t-shirt with what is clearly a black Pac-Man on it. I should be showing you a Seeker deck list this week because as much as people probably already know how to play Seekers, I think with the release of the new G trial deck and the stride mechanic, it's worth going over it and just sort of refreshing our memory and the nuances of the deck and what you can change and the sort of things that the stride brings to the deck. So let's get straight on with it, shall we? Okay, getting straight on with the deck list, and my beautiful man Vega here will be, our playmat for the day. Starting with the grade 3s, we've got quite a simple sort of lineup here. We've got 4 Things Saber Dragon, because if you're running Seekers and not running this thing, you're either doing it on a budget or you being hipster, I suppose, being politically correct. Card is just extremely powerful. It's any Vanguard that can attack twice, particularly in Legion. There's this guy and Phantom Blaster Abyss that spring to mind, is just solid. I'm running 3 copies of Alfred E14 because I actually think he's really good. To set up, I would go into him before I went into Thingsaver, because I think Thingsaver is designed for that final push, whereas Alfred can apply pressure like nobody's business. And I am running 8 grade 3s, as I think a single Wingle Sacred Wingle, is really, really good. Again, for that early game, you only want one of it because it's not always as good as Alfred is. But especially with the new stride guy, Gabblade, you can go +1 off of this guy straight away from Legion, or you go into your grade 3, then stride straight into Gabblade, +1 off of him, and then next turn Legion use this guy to Legion, and plus again. So you can get like really, really strong pressure applied through this guy that Alfred can't necessarily provide. And he doesn't cost counterblast when he does anything, which is always a bonus. Moving on to grade 2s now, there's 4 copies of Blaster Blade Seeker because he goes with practically everything in the deck and he's solid on his own. There is no reason not to run 4 of this guy. I'm running 3 copies of Cedric it should be, but never mind, as he's the 9/12 attacker. You can't really go wrong with that. Most decks have one, most decks play theirs. 4 copies of Gildas. Now, he is where I love using my counterblast if it's not on Thingsaver. He, again, any straight card advantage is always a plus in my books. You can never go wrong with it. And Gildas is not weak. 9k attack will still hit things boosted. He's not bad. He's actually very good. But going on to grade 1s now. 4 Perfect Guards. I'm not running any Quintet Walls because I don't think they're necessary, and I think the counterblast is too important to use. I can understand why people do run one, because you can fill your graveyard up quickly for your legions and stuff, but I think with stride that becomes less necessary. You can stride before you go legion. Therefore you don't need to run the Quintet Wall, and I think that if you're going to go on a defensive play, these guys are too important, particularly with stride now being a thing. 3 copies of Lake Maiden Lien. Now, she's still good. You still want a Legion at the end of the day. There's no reason not to. And, hand fixing is always quite nice. You want to drop a draw trigger. This is your girl to go to. 3 of the 7 to 10 attacker, because same as the 9 to 12 attacker. Yes, it's basic, but basic works. Simple is always good. Now, I run 2 copies of Gringle Seeker. He's good. His effect is really, really good, but he's so specific on what he needs. You have to hit while he's boosted a Blaster Blade Seeker, which doesn't sound like much because Blaster Blade Seeker will be turning up, but having him and Blaster Blade Seeker out on the board at the same time in the same column doesn't always happen. But if you get the opportunities, you should always use it, because refreshing hand and turning damage face up is always good. It means repeated use of Gildas, or if you're really lucky, extra Thingsaver attacks. And then I'm also running 2 copies of Seeker Rune Eagle, because he also sits behind any Legion guy quite nicely. However, I have considered dropping this guy because he doesn't give the extra boost to your stride guys. Your stride will only copy the heart of one of your legions, so therefore this guy doesn't treat your Striden guy as a Legion, so I actually have considered dropping him for a fourth copy of the 7 to 10 attacker and a fourth copy of Lien. And then my trigger lineup is quite simple: 4 heal triggers, 8 critical triggers, and rather embarrassingly, I don't have Margle, but 4 draw triggers. Luckily, they have reprinted Margle in the new trial deck, so I'll be sure to pick up a few of those to go in this deck, most definitely. And then my grade 0 is probably the only thing in this in the main deck that I would consider changing for something in the trial deck. File is okay. That's all he is, though. He's not bad. He can grab you a Blaster Blade, but he can't. He's very specific in what he does. Whereas Shining Knight Milius from the trial deck can grab you any grade 2 as long as you've stridden once in the game at some point. So he's more versatile. Yes, he does cost Counterblast, but whereas File doesn't. But that's why you run Gringle Seeker, on the off chance that you can that you can recover from that. I wouldn't necessarily do it, but I definitely think it's worth trying. The other thing that you would obviously want to add from the trial deck is Gablade, the new grade 4, and he's very, very good. He's easily sort of one of the better of the 3. Being able to search for cards and plus off of him, plays very well into the deck. You can, because Thingsaver sort of depletes your hand advantage, you need to make up for it in field advantage, which is why the one of Wingle Seeker is there, and Gablade can help that quite heavily. So hopefully you'll get a general idea of how to play Seekers from what I've given you here. If you can't afford Thingsavers, then Wingle, you can actually do quite well with just 4 copies of both trial decks to get Blaster Blade Seekers, Wingle Seekers. The perfect guards that are actually in the deck, which are in the new deck quite handily, will still suffice, and you'll get obviously Gablades as well. Obviously it's not perfect because you don't have Thingsavers or Alfreds, but if you're working on a budget, there's no reason why you can't try. Then the only things that you'd possibly be missing are things like Gildas, and that's pretty much it. Actually, it's not going to sort of definitely have an advantage over a fully built Seeker deck, but if you can't afford to get things like Thingsavers, they're not the cheapest things in the world. Then go for something that's a little bit lower. Vanguard is still very much a blackjack luck-based game. It's obviously a lot less than it used to be, but it's still worth bearing in mind that it's not all hope is not lost if you can't afford to get all these big expensive cards. So hopefully that'll give you an insight. And drop me a comment if you want any advice on anything that you think you might want to build for yourself. And then we'll go from there. Drop us a like, a subscribe, and a share, and then we'll hopefully see each other later.